Yeah, it's a mere coincidence that two Dr. Ramachandrans are presenting on Singapore today. I'm Lakshmi, and let me take you through a little story behind organizing the Gender Summit in Singapore, the next Asia Pacific in Singapore. A year back, I attended my first Gender Summit, the Gender Summit 10 in Tokyo. There I was representing the Women in Science group from the Mechanobiology Institute in Singapore, where I worked. My experience at the GS10 was a big revelation in itself. First, being someone working at the grassroots level, I learned about the importance of policy level measures in creating the desired outcome in gender equality at a larger scale. Secondly, since gender inequality in STEM is a complex, multi-layer problem that includes the individual, the family, the society, the organizations, and the government, it makes sense to tackle these problems through a multidimensional approach at various levels, essentially bridging the grassroots level initiatives with the policy level measures. In that regard, I was especially impressed by the outcome from the GS10 in Tokyo. As Miyoko mentioned, BRIDGE, which stands for Better Research and Innovation Through Diversity and Gender Equality. This highlights, as she said, the need to bridge the gender dimension with science, technology, and innovation, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and most importantly, all people. It is very important to understand the real problems faced by people in science, especially women in science, and make them part of this movement. I say this because I am a woman in science, a mother of two, and I'm able to relate to many of the issues that hinder the career progression of women in STEM globally. This includes the leaky career pipe, imposter experience such as lack of self-confidence issues, challenges in networking, and various other issues faced by these women when they try to relaunch themselves back into a scientific career. It is a very fact that I am able to relate to these problems that made me want to do something about this, change the situation, and enable my fellow women in science to retain their scientific careers. I left the GS10 in Tokyo thinking that the Gender Summit is the best platform to create the much required awareness in taking the much needed action to solve these problems. On the same note, the Gender Summit Asia Pacific, which will be held in Singapore, is a purely grassroots level initiative, which includes women in science like myself, Vandana, and many others who are coming together, strengthening our efforts through collaboration. Why Singapore for GSAP 2019? First and foremost, Singapore has a huge focus on science, technology, and innovation. And as we saw from the talks yesterday morning, adding the gender dimension into these efforts will definitely benefit research and innovation by filling certain gaps. Secondly, the Gender Summit will help in Singapore will help promote the inclusion of and collaboration of countries within the Asia Pacific region in promoting gender-sensitive research. No doubt, Singapore is a top venue for international conferences owing to its strategic location, excellent infrastructure, high efficiency, vibrant business ecosystems, and knowledge networks. Next, we hope that the Gender Summit in Singapore, for us, it will serve as a platform to bring pockets of STEM initiatives together under one umbrella. Vandana will be sharing more about this in her part. There are a few women in science initiatives in Singapore, and I'm part of this MBI Women in Science, which was established by Professor Linda Kenny in 2014. We are a small group, but we have put in significant small steps towards creating large impacts. For example, one of the best ways to tackle unconscious bias is by making conscious efforts. For example, we have set a mandate that all MBI conferences will have at least 30% representation of women. We also organize career talks by female role models, self-development talks and workshops, etc. We also make sure that we provide a comfortable room for working mothers. One thing that I really wish to highlight is that we organize a national level symposium called BIOS, which brings together all women researchers from diverse realms of science to discuss their research, collaborate, and network. With this, I invite Dr. Vandana Ramachandran to present the rest of the talk. I must say that it is her involvement that made a nascent idea that I had about organizing the Gender Summit a reality. Over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Lakshmi. Can you hear me? Yes. Good morning, and thank you, Elizabeth, for inviting us. Let me start by giving you a small spiel about the Singapore Women in Science, which was formed about 4 years ago. It's a voluntary organization. The co-founders are Cheryl McCaffrey and myself. As with MBI Women in Science, we host regular career events by female leaders from all fields of science, like from academia to industry, government, policy, and startups. What works really well for us are our networking happy hours because it provides an informal platform for women to network. We act as a support group for mentorship where it's needed and friendships. In fact, some of my best friends I've met through these networks, which includes Lakshmi. We facilitate collaborations and have joint events with women in science groups all over Singapore, and the ultimate aim is to bring everyone together as we do share common goals. I've highlighted the person in yellow is actually Dr. Nancy Gray, who we hosted last month. She's the CEO of the Gordon Conferences, and she's fully on board with us for the Gender Summit. Yes. We were extremely fortunate to co-host Elizabeth at the start of this year as she was passing through Singapore on her way to London. What we did was to reach out to our networks and invited people from various organizations who we thought would be interested in moving forward the GS agenda and organizing the summit in Singapore. Elizabeth, of course, gave a fantastic talk, which was met with much enthusiasm and basically sealed the deal for us in having the summit in Singapore. And I have to say that the majority of the people who attended the talk are now part of our organizing committee. So we've actually formed our advisory committee as well. And I've just highlighted Prof. Z. Upton, who is the executive director of the Institute of Medical Biology and my boss. So she has graciously funded my trip for this conference, and she's also a huge proponent of the Women in STEM. Prof. Birgit Lane was the former ED of IMB, and in her leadership, we had the highest number of female principal investigators among all of the institutes in A-STAR. I'm actually really proud of that. She's made a conscious effort in terms of recruitment of faculty. So what we've decided to do for the organization of the summit is to divide it into 5 broad themes. This is still work in progress, but each of these themes are being led by volunteers from the various organizations. And some of those logos belong to those organizations, and some of them are Singaporean, and of course you see the UN Women and UNESCO on board as well. After all, what we would really like to do is to explore the best policies and practices from around the world that we could adopt in Singapore. Our overarching aim is the emphasis on actionable changes. This slide basically shows all the current partners that we have in Singapore, the various women organizations in Singapore, the women initiatives in the various universities and hospitals, the research institutes, the Japan Science and Tech Agency, of course, they're a partner, and the industries, which is going to be our cash cow for sure. And I'm extremely happy to say, as a Singaporean, we finally got the first female president. And I think the time is absolutely right for a gender summit in Singapore. So, Madam Halima Yaacob, I'm working on this, but she's definitely going to be our guest of honor. And the last but not least, we actually do have a date, the 27th and 28th of August, 2019. and I hope to see all of you over there next year. Thank you very much.